We are Apex School's newest education ambassadors.
Hi. You're probably wondering why there are two of us, a real-world version and a digital version. That is because APEC has created two online digital courses in light of the new norm.
Agile and Flex.
That's right. It's no coincidence that APEC's curriculum is centered around technology. Their whole culture is. It's what makes them perfectly placed to take on the new normal.
Good evening, everyone. I hope you've all had dinner. Thank you for joining us in the latest episode of INQlusive, the Inquirer webinar series in partnership with Apex Schools and Far Eastern University, produced by the Philippine Daily Inquirer, Inquirer.net, Inquirer Super, and Inquirer 2BU. I'm Pam Pastor, Inquirer Super and Inquirer 2BU editor, and I'm co-moderating this session with Roel S. De Vera, also from Inquirer, and former program coordinator for Ateneo's Blended Learning Masters in Journalism program.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Education in Focus, the classroom at home. Tonight, we'll talk extensively about the classroom, long the outside bastion of formal education, now right inside our very homes. How exactly are we going to make this all work?
We have speakers who will be offering different perspectives on this hot topic. Previously, in another INQlusive webinar last month, we asked the question, are we ready for an online semester? This time, closer to the mandated school opening, we will talk about changes, updates, and yes, even more challenges.
Let me introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is the Undersecretary for Curriculum and Instruction at the Department of Education. He holds a research PhD in education from the University of Newcastle in Australia. He has been tasked to coordinate the ongoing review of the K-12 curriculum. He also attempts to find ways of ensuring that every learner achieves authentic literacy. He pushes for transparency, ethics, and accountability in school governance. In addition, he believes that a strong rewards and recognition system is an effective way to encourage officials and teachers to aim for excellence. Furthermore, he strengthens a strong research culture towards meaningful innovations for learning. Finally, he nurtures productive partnerships with all educational stakeholders. Let us welcome Undersecretary JOIE M. San Antonio. Good evening, USEC.
Good evening, Sir Ruel. Good evening, Ms. Pam. Good evening to my fellow panelists and to the viewers of this episode. In the name of Secretary Leonor Liling Magtolis Briones, we would like to extend our gratitude for the opportunity to convey the messages from our department to relay what's happening. Let me start by sharing that the Department of Education has developed a basic education learning continuity plan in cooperation and collaboration with our major stakeholders. We are guided by the principles, the following principles. First, we have to make sure that the learners and our fellow teachers are protected, healthy, and safe, even as we open the school year 2020-2021. We also, of course, would like to make sure that learning will continue. We have modified the curriculum, we have streamlined the curriculum, we have reduced essentially our most essential learning competencies so that we can pay attention and focus on the most important ones, the foundational skills that our youngsters would need so that they can really survive in this very competitive world. We will, if ever allowed, facilitate safe return to schools, but that would not be soon, it seems. We'll be sensitive to issues of equity. Of course, we know that the higher social classes tend to have advantages when it comes to learning, and the Department of Education is mindful of these issues. And we will link all our efforts to our previous initiative for Sulong Edukalidad, which is essentially a pivot to quality, because prior to COVID-19, the Department of Education has been effective in fulfilling the mandate on access, but the challenge was indeed on quality And we will still pursue Secretary Liling's major thrust on futures thinking in education. Of course, for COVID-19 pandemic times, for school year 2020-2021, we will deliver education starting August 24 using distance learning delivery modalities in different shapes, online for those with gadgets and access to internet, digital modular learning for those without internet access but with access to computers, printed modular learning for those without any gadget at all to use. And then we'll supplement this with TV and radio-based instruction. And we also say this could be blended, so we will have blended distance learning. I think that would be all initially. Thank you very much again, Ruel and Ms. Pam.
Thank you so much, Yusek. Now, our second speaker is the Digital Marketing Head and Community Manager of Glamo Mamas and other local brands. She describes herself as an unschooling mom. She's going to tell us about that in a bit. And she and her husband, Brando, live by the beach with their two children, Ailey and Aman. She believes that every moment is a teaching moment, and she and Brando strive to be intentional parents every single day. Let's all welcome Miss TRIX CLASARA. Good evening, TRIX.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm also here, on behalf of the entire Glamo Mamas group. So just to give you a quick background, Glamo Mamas is a community group of moms, and it was started by Amanda Griffin Jacob, right, around 6 years ago. So I also have a lot of insights about the different concerns of, different moms in terms of like coping in this pandemic, and especially with the distance learning of their children. And as far as unschooling, yes, I am an unschooling mom. So that's simply to say that my kids are not enrolled. Actually, Pam asked me that a while ago if it means that my kids are not enrolled this year. No, it's actually like pandemic or no pandemic. My kids are not enrolled in any school. My kids are 5 and 4 years old. And we don't also follow any curriculum in terms of their education. So unschooling is about, trusting children, trusting the design of humans, that we are curious learners. So we rely a lot on life experiences and a lot of indoor and outdoor activities that help us create sort of our own curriculum, based on their interests, based on the personalities of our children as well. So thank you for having me tonight. I'm excited to talk about it more.
Thank you, TRIX. Our third speaker is the President and CEO of Apex Schools, the largest chain of standalone private high schools in the Philippines with 22 branches and more than 15,000 students. Apex Schools is one of the few schools which successfully transitioned to online distance learning at the beginning of the quarantine. The school is ready to open this academic year 2020-2021 on the August 24 deadline online. Prior to Apex Schools, JOIE was a managing director at Accenture, where she spent most of her career. She has experience in large-scale programs and worked in different projects in consulting, IT, and BPO. JOIE recently held the position of Programs Director at Ayala Foundation, where she managed programs in education, sustainable livelihood, and youth leadership. Please welcome JOIE Lopez. Good evening, ma'am.
Hi, thank you, and good evening, everyone. I hope everyone is safe and well. As Ruel said, when the ECQ was imposed in March, and face-to-face classes were not possible, many schools were challenged to bring their classes online. Classes were suspended, I think, beginning March 9 or 10, but Apex Schools was able to start our online distance classes on March 16. I think the transition to online distance learning was not as difficult for Apex Schools, mainly due to how we are organized and how we operate. First, our curriculum and teaching materials are developed centrally, and that's how it has always been. This is meant to ensure that quality is consistent across our branches. The materials are housed in our learning management system, which our teachers access. So when the pivot to online distance learning was needed, our more than 500 teachers didn't need to figure out how to prepare materials by themselves. Our curriculum development team started developing modules that are geared towards online learning. Then we trained the teachers, and then we rolled out the modules. Second, even during face-to-face classes, our teachers and students were already used to using technology in their classes. All of our teachers are provided with laptops with which they conduct their classes. Our students use Chromebooks and tablets in class, so transitioning to online learning was not as painful. Then there is that combination of luck and preparation. In January, which parang seems so long ago, when Taal started acting up, we were worried about missing school days. So we thought about what would happen, how will we handle it, if classes were suspended and the students are not allowed in class. We then had some time for planning and preparation. We ended last school year with our students working with their teachers online, and we are ready to open the school year on August 24 in blended mode. This means that while face-to-face classes are not allowed, our classes will be online. But when the situation gets better, and IATF, DepEd, and the LGU advise that we can go back to the classrooms, and we assess that it is safe for our students and employees to go back, we will gradually transition back to the classrooms. However, when we announced this plan, there were requests of parents who are not comfortable for their children to go back to the classroom. DepEd also asked the schools to look at different modes of teaching. In response to these, we designed and launched a fully online homeschooling program as well. So we start August 24 with a blended classroom and another that is homeschooling. There are a few challenges with online distance learning, and top of mind for most parents would be internet connectivity and the need for gadgets. So the challenge is to find the most appropriate, cost-effective providers. For the schools, especially at our price point, it would be balancing designing the materials and the modules in such a way that we maximize student learning, but be conscious of not requiring too much bandwidth from the students. Another challenge is, how do you make online learning engaging for the students, especially if they are going to stay in their rooms studying for 4 to 6 hours a day? Schools are now revisiting how they teach, how they test, and how they grade as everyone adopts to this new normal. I'm also looking forward to hearing from the others about their experience and the challenges they face during these times. So back to you, Ruel and Pam.
Thank you, Ms. JOIE. The last member of our panel is Inquirer's own reporter who covers communities, local governments, and courts. She, along with fellow Inquirer reporter Krisha Subing, bagged the Best Investigative Report Award at the 41st Catholic Mass Media Awards in 2019. As a two-time fellow of the Southeast Asian Press Alliance's regional reporting program, she wrote stories about the plight of female prisoners and how state-sponsored disinformation affects democracy. She has also written about various topics on education and social justice, such as the drug war, mental illness, women farmers, prisoners, and the urban poor. She graduated with a journalism degree from the University of the Philippines, Diliman in 2014, and is now pursuing her master's degree in anthropology in the same university. Everyone, please welcome Marijo Ijo Ramos. Good evening, Ijo.
Hi, thank you, Pam, and good evening, everyone. This is a very important discussion because one of the most affected sectors in our society that have truly been shaken by COVID-19 pandemic is the education sector. So since March, learners and educators have been scrambling to find ways to adjust to new modes of learning and at the same time cope with the health crisis in their respective households and communities. And of course, their socioeconomic capacities to cope differ as well. So that premise alone creates, for me, contrasting paradigms in discussing education issues at this point. So we really need to listen to multiple voices, not just the national government, but also educators, school officials, school heads, parents, the learners themselves, and even local governments. So the discussion now transcends the four corners of the classroom, so to speak. And on the ground, we hear stories of learners and educators being distressed by the spread of the virus as schools are closed down, or students from the provinces and urban poor communities bereft of their access to the internet or digital devices. We hear stories of parents having to go the extra mile just to provide digital devices or the needed tools for their children's remote learning. And of course, we hear stories of teachers. We hear this a lot of having to deal with their personal battles and anxieties, dedicating more time and energy to make things work. But as I cover these stories, what I notice is these actors truly value education. They really want this to work. They really want education to continue despite the challenges, despite the restrictions. But whether they're getting the assistance that they need is another matter for me. And I hope this is one of the points that we could shed light on in this discussion.
All right. Thank you, Ijo. Now that we've introduced our panel, let's dive right in and start our discussion. To everyone tuning into this event, please feel free to ask questions as we will be choosing some that will be answered in the second half of this online discussion. Your concerns are very important to us, and we have a great panel today who might just be able to give you the answer you've been looking for in this time of great anxiety, in this time in which we're looking for answers, in this time in which we're just wondering, what are we gonna do? So, Pam, take it away.
Before that, I want to say that we are seeing people from all over the Philippines tuning in, and we're really happy about that. This really is a discussion that involves the whole country. We have students in all corners of the country. So we see you, people from Binagas Basan, Garchitorena, Camarines Sur, Sara Iloilo, Occidental Mindoro, Catanduanes, India, Pangasinan, South Cotabato, Iriga City, Sorsogon, Taguig. We see you, and I love the hashtag that one of the viewers posted, hashtag LearnAsOnePH, because it's true what Ijo said. There's really a big difference between somebody from the higher classes preparing for the new school year as opposed to somebody who doesn't have the means to. And I just wanted to mention, since this webinar is one of the producers is the 2BU section of Inquirer, we've been doing stories on how young people, how students feel about the shift to blended learning. And you know, the striking thing for me is a lot of the students who are actually well off, their big concern is they don't want to leave behind their peers. Like, they worry about the students who don't have access to gadgets and access to good internet. So I think that's a really beautiful thing. So that Learn as One page is a beautiful thing that we need to think about, because we can't let students get left behind because of this. So for our first question, this is for Undersecretary San Antonio. So USEC, last month, we talked to USEC Nepo Malaluan. And when we were talking to him, he was discussing the different modalities. But at that point, a lot of the things were still in planning stages. Like, there were just a lot of meetings going on. Can you tell us what's the status now? With less than a month to go, August 24 is fast approaching. How ready are we? We would love to hear updates from DepEd.
Thank you very much, Ms. Palm. We would like to say that on the basis of the timelines we have set, we're just on time. Right now, we are sharing the self-learning modules with the field because the reproduction is going to be decentralized. That's one of the things we did. It would be a big nightmare if the whole thing would have been centralized, and even logistics would be a problem. So we decided that for the first quarter, the learning materials, particularly the self-learning modules, would be reproduced at the ground level, regions, divisions, and schools. And according to our monitoring, they're now in the midst of reproducing this or procuring the self-learning resources as reproduction. The other thing is, right now, we're also training the principals, the supervisors, and even teachers because they should really be made capable of doing new things. We also feel that we cannot expect people to deliver new things and perform new roles if they have not been fully capacitated. So we will continue to do it until we open the school year. This August, we also intend to capacitate parents and home learning facilitators as well. And what else are we doing relative to the decisions on what specific modality for distance learning would be done by a learner or a school has been also given to the schools and the division offices. It's not the central office that tells schools what they would offer in terms of the modality for distance learning. They have been guided depending on the resources available at home and in the school. They will make decisions whether to do online or use printed learning modules, etc. But even if in our survey, we have discovered that about 10% only of the learners would not have access to any form of gadget, many, about one half of our enrollees, would still want to receive printed learning modules. But of course, we have to prioritize. We also have actually discussed among ourselves that the textbooks, if we have mapped them against our most essential learning competencies, because the textbooks can be used as additional learning resource, especially if an activity sheet is designed or developed by the teacher together with a learning plan. So right now, I think what's going on is the individual localized dry runs, and the national dry run will be, I think, August 10. We'll do the national dry run on the 10th of August. And on the basis of the results of the dry run, we are really encouraged that the teachers and the school officials were able to demonstrate creativity, commitment, and passion. And the communities, the barangay officials, municipal mayors, and governors have also been able to demonstrate that they are, as usual, even before, because I've been with DepEd for 35 years. I started out as a teacher. And I really, when I say the local governments would always support DepEd, it's still happening now. They're helping us.
Thank you, Undersecretary. JOIE, this question is for you. How did APEC schools manage to make such a quick transition during the early days of the pandemic? What challenges did you face and how did you overcome them?
Okay, so I mentioned earlier about planning and preparation as well as training our teachers. I'm very thankful that our teams are very flexible and quick to respond to challenges. The first challenge was everyone trying to adjust to working and studying from home. Even now, it's sometimes tiring, no, to have back-to-back Zoom meetings because it's different from face-to-face meetings. And then you'll have meetings or the teachers will be meeting their students and then there's noise in the background or someone will get disconnected. But as Yusek Dad said, a lot of creativity also came out. In terms of support, we had to revise our operational processes so that we support the branches. Our HR process, IT, and finance had to be redesigned because not everyone is at home. For the parents, we rolled out online enrollment so that they don't need to go to the branches to enroll. Today, a lot of the parents are in wait and see mode. And you can see it from the enrollment numbers, right? Most schools are experiencing most private schools are experiencing either low or slow enrollment. And there are questions on how will the schools implement online learning or how are we sure that our kids will learn. Next week, Apex Schools is launching a module for parents and guardians called How to Learn Online. It's self-paced. Aside from understanding how we will conduct our classes, there will be tips on how to maximize online learning. We will post it on our FB page and will be available to everyone. So we hope that that will be helpful for parents who will guide their kids as they go through this new way of schooling.
Thank you, Joey. Trix, can you talk about your decision to become an unschooling mom? And a while ago, you were explaining to us the difference between homeschooling and unschooling. So our viewers might want to know that as well. Because like to me, this is a very new concept. And like you said, you've been an unschooling mom even before the pandemic. But are you seeing that more parents are choosing to go the same way because of the pandemic? And what tips would you have for them? Because you've been doing this for a while.
Okay. All right. So I'll start how we decided to do unschooling. When I first became a mom, I actually read an article about this family who was unschooling, also here in the Philippines. And it got me so interested about their lifestyle that it was something that I wanted as well for my kids. So I read about it and actually came across John Holt. So John Holt is actually the guy who coined the term unschooling in sometime in the 60s, right? So it's been here for a while. It's just that I guess nobody talks about it a lot, and it took, I guess, decades and a pandemic for people to even start talking about unschooling. So homeschooling basically is doing school at home, right? Which means you're still enrolled with a provider and you still have a curriculum, right? I'm not a homeschooler, so that's what I understand of it. Whereas unschooling, like I mentioned earlier, is that we do not follow any kind of curriculum. It's very based on the interests of my kids, right? So, like I said in my profile, every moment becomes a teaching moment, and that's really the basic and most important factor of unschooling is that you are a present parent and that you're always finding ways to kind of incorporate new lessons in the things that we're doing every day. It's about experiencing life together with your children. And a lot of the things that I've read about unschooling really resonated with me personally because I honestly didn't like school so much. So I came from a traditional school background, okay? And I guess, when you're in school, there's too many things to think about, right? You have, like the uniform and just like standing in line. You don't know why, but you have to do it, right? And your socks need to be the same length, but there's no reason to it. You just have to do it, right? And then it's always like a lesson and the end result. I'm sorry, the end goal is always a test. And based on that test, you either graduate or you don't. So there are subjects that I failed, like math. Like, so if because of failing math, I always thought I was bad in math, but it's actually not the case. When you grow older as an adult, you realize that the more you apply those lessons, the more that you actually understand the concepts behind them, right? Because, for me, like learn and unschooling in general teaches us that learning is not linear. It doesn't take a test for you to for you to recognize if somebody understands the lesson or not. So that's why it's so important for me to raise our kids that way. I don't want that, societal pressure for them to feel like they have to do things like ABC like this way. And that's really what it is. And I share about unschooling a lot because even before the pandemic, I share about it a lot, not to like convert people to join to become an unschooler. I think that goes against unschooling in the first place, but I want to share with them our personal experiences, like with my kids, how they're thriving as we unschool them. To have unschooling allows them to explore their world and ask their own questions without adults interfering, telling them what kind of questions they should be asking, right? Or what are they supposed to be observing. It because there's no curriculum, they're just free to hold their own space to like think independently as well. So I always share about it in the hopes of encouraging other parents that, what, I have all respect for schools and education, right? But when it comes to learning, there are different ways to learn, and our kids are all unique. So I always want to encourage that as well. That especially now in this climate where basically the world has stopped, right? And parents are so confused what to do. I want to encourage them that even if you're just staying at home with your kids and you tell them a story or you talk to them and you get to know them, it's a teaching moment, and you can learn so much from your kids as well. So that's really what unschooling is about. And for me as a parent, I feel like unschooling also has taught me to, like a newfound love for learning as well, because I see it in my kids, right? And it's also given me bigger space for empathy, right? Because I'm dealing with my kids 24/7, and it helps my patience with them like translates with when I deal with adults as well. So it's really amazing. And I know there's a solid community of unschoolers already in the Philippines, and they actually have their own community group in Facebook. If you're curious, you can also check that out. I love that group. They're a solid group. I adore the parents who unschool as well, because I learn a lot from them too. So there.
Thank you, Trix. Ijo, you've recently done stories on the mental health of educators, on schools possibly closing, remote enrollment, and more. Can you paint a big picture for us? Do you think we are ready for this new school year?
Thank you for that difficult question, Sir Louis. But first, the COVID-19 pandemic uh, have had a profound impact on education, not only in the Philippines, but the rest of the world. So schools being closed down or academic institutions transitioning to blended learning aren't unique to us. In the Philippines, the Department of Education had its first remote enrollment process in June to minimize face-to-face interaction in schools. And I believe DepEd has reached its target, which is 80% of last year's enrollment, or around 22 million. The DepEd also conducted a survey that showed more than 80%, or 700,000 teachers, have laptops and desktops in their homes, which made them optimistic that distance learning could work. And localities will have to adjust na lang their learning continuity plans accordingly. When it comes to financing distance learning, the DepEd said it had to redesign budget sources to fund the learning continuity plan for public schools amid the pandemic. So the agency has identified financing strategies for distance learning, among them the use of the Special Education Fund. Ito galing from local governments, the school's maintenance and other operating expenses, assistance from development partners, and contributions from the private sector through the Brigada Escuela. However, there are certain realities that the national government needs to look at, as it only has it took less than a month to prepare for blended learning. At the most basic sense, we could say that the biggest challenge really is that some can afford distance learning while others cannot. There are millions of marginalized and poverty-stricken children all over the country who cannot go to school or already at a disadvantage even before the pandemic. Who cannot go to school kasi walang pambaon or walang pamasahe or walang pambili ng gamit. And their socioeconomic predicament is exacerbated by the new requirements to catch up with their peers with the new modes of learning. Some teachers, meanwhile, have laptops, but they're outdated or the kinds na will have difficulties while conducting online classes. Another reality is the Philippines also has one of the slowest and most expensive internet services in the region. So there's really unequal or asymmetrical access to information communication technology infrastructure across different socioeconomic classes in the country. Many areas still lack internet access, and even here in Metro Manila, na supposedly advanced na, some households still suffer from poor speeds and poor bandwidths. So for me, in order for blended learning to work, there has to be the right combination of software and hardware. And that could be costly to DepEd and to learners and their parents. But I'm sure the national government and the local governments are doing something about it. And another issue, teachers also need to acquire a certain level of IT competency and proficiency for distance learning. And that could be difficult. Some have also pointed out that this could be exhausting really on the part of parents or guardians, especially those who have who are economically challenged and have to juggle work with house chores or family matters while assisting or monitoring their children as they engage in online learning, for example. That's why this is recent news that I've heard. Local schools divisions have initiated training programs for teachers and parents. May training then on remote psychosocial support to help teachers and parents cope with online learning. But all of these need to be sustained. So if I were to be asked if we're ready, that readiness would depend on the level of confidence that learners and their parents have on our institutions and other sectors, and how committed these institutions are, whether from the national or local governments, not to fail the trust and confidence that they've been given. The public and private assistance that would be extended to learners and educators should not be until the opening of classes, I think. And then let's see what happens. I think it really has to be sustained, a sustained effort, which of course would only be possible with solid planning and taking into consideration local context and challenges.
Thank you, Ijo. You've given us a lot to think about. Undersecretary San Antonio, what are your thoughts on the enrollment turnout for this school year? Do you think that, because a lot of the students that we've interviewed, their concern is they're going to leave behind their peers, the ones who might not be able to enroll for a variety of reasons. And I know you're really passionate about education and literacy. What are your thoughts on this? Do you think that some students will be left behind? Do you think there's a way for them to catch up to their peers?
Firstly, when we had to revise our targets, enrollment targets, we said we would go for 80%. Secretary Liling was really very clear in saying that there would be a reduction in the enrollment considering the economic crisis. And our numbers are slightly ahead, over 80% now when we combine public and private school enrollment. But in the public sector, it's more than 90% now. And what's really a bit of a challenge is the enrollment numbers in private schools. But of course, this is also backed up by the fact that the clients of private schools, the parents are most likely affected by the economic crisis. So what we're doing now, we had an executive committee meeting this afternoon, and Secretary Liling was challenging our alternative learning system group on how to reach out to the learners who won't be able to go back as regular learners in the formal system. The other issue about, yes, we really appreciate that the learners from upper social classes are concerned about their counterparts from poorer families. And we understand that ideally everybody has to have access on all gadgets, and ideally we should have a very fast internet so everybody would have equal access to resources. But as mentioned by Lejo, that's not the case. The real world is really, there's a wide gap between the access to resources of the wealthier families compared with their poorer counterparts. And that's why even when we allocate resources at the central office, we had to take into account the SEF available in the area. So in a way, there was an equitable allocation of funds to a certain point. It's not absolute, but it was a factor when the allocations for the the learning continuity plan implementation and operationalization at the local levels were determined, we also took that into account. We understand that yes, the local governments that have more SEFs are even able to say we are going to procure gadgets for every learner in our area. And of course, learners in far-flung areas would have to make do with printed, perhaps TV and radio. And so there would really be differences in terms of access to resources. But as I was saying, it does not have to be like just because you don't have access to the internet, the child would no longer learn. I feel that when we engage the child, when we make the child excited to learn, regardless of the kind of resource that child has access to, the child will still be able to learn and perhaps prepare himself or herself for a more competitive world later on.
Thank you, Yusek. Joey, some schools are still struggling to shift to blended learning. What tips would you have for educators who are having such a difficult time making this shift?
There is a tendency to just jump into it and convert face-to-face materials into videos, then call it online learning. The first advice would be do not get pressured on technology because there are a lot of tools out there, some of them even free. Plan first and focus on your intended outcomes and what you want to deliver to your students. Next is capitalize on the strength of your team members, assign and divert depending on the need instead of roles. Be selective on what you say yes to because there will be so many distractions. Just focus on delivering the end goal, which are the outcomes that you set forth for your students. And lastly, don't hesitate to ask for help because there are organizations which can help. In one of the interviews with Sec Liling, they did mention that if there are schools that are needing help, just reach out to DepEd and they would even have training for setting up your learning management system, for example. For example, we're also working with the National Teachers College to develop modules, and we'll roll that out soon. But in addition to our module on how to learn online, Apex Schools is also developing another module on how to teach online. That will also be available for free on our FB page in August. So I hope that will also be helpful for the teachers out there who are trying to figure things out.
Thank you so much, Ms. Joey. That's amazing. That's good. I think that a lot of educators would appreciate getting access to that. Now, TRIX, as community manager of Glamo Mamas, of course, you know, you get to see, first, Glamo Mamas are really just moms, or do you have dads in the mix also?
They're just moms.
And then, what kind of discussions have you been observing parents having? What are their biggest concerns? And since the beginning, when it first became clear that students might not be able to make it back to school this school year, like in the physical classroom, have their concerns changed over the weeks, over the months?
Yeah, okay. So Glamo Mamas is an all-mom group. Okay, it's an all-female, mom group. And so I think the two major concerns are one, that a lot of the moms are trying to figure out how to do distance learning in the first place, because let's face it, these moms also have to work, right? So the reality is it's either they have to work or they're trying to run their businesses or they're trying to keep afloat in this pandemic. So who is going to teach their children? And even if they find a way to stay at home or work from home, another issue is, are their kids receptive to this change? Because not every kid is going to sit in front of a screen, and you can't just expect them to learn, or to learn the same as others, right? Because again, every child has a different learning capability, different learning style. And I see that a lot of these moms, they're getting frustrated because, they've enrolled their kids just for the sake of not being left behind. But then their kids are not responding well to online classes. And it's a struggle for them to just make them sit there and try to learn. Another major issue, I think, would be the concern for screen time. So pre-pandemic, like just even last year in 2019, the buzzword was, screen-free, iPad-free, right? Every pediatrician and educator was advocating against, iPads and gadgets. And then now everybody has to shift to that kind of learning. So there's a lot of confusion with moms right now. And I think that frustration is really stemmed from the fact that there's a lack of direction, a lack of real planning for the moms, right? Because what are they gonna do? It's like they're put in a tough place right now, and they don't they're trying to cope as well, and they want their kids to learn, but they can't also control what's happening, right? So those are the two major concerns. But I also wanted to add, like, apart from Glamo Mama's group, right? Like, as I mentioned earlier, like, I live in the province, and even the community here, right? I'm also thinking about what happens to the kids and the women here, the moms here. It's hard for them to teach their kids or to send their kids back to school, right? Because again, we're so lacking in internet connection, and even just to have the gadgets, it's hard for them. So I think proper planning and proper planning and clear directions are so important right now for all parents. And more importantly, that plan needs to be inclusive of everybody, right? Not just from the AB sector, but everybody like every child in the Philippines, this should not be left behind in terms of education. So yeah.
Thank you.
TRIX, one of the big changes of this coming year is that these are not pocket incidents. The changes that are being done are sweeping changes across the educational system. And one of the questions is, for those parents and children studying formally at home for the first time, what can be done to make sure that their workplaces are free of distraction, and that the students know when it's time to study and when study time is over? Anyone can answer this, because a lot of people want to know, how do I manage my student slash son, daughter at home when it's time to study? Anyone?
So I'll give my take as a parent. So so my son is 9 years old. So it's at that age, it's a little difficult to get them engaged in class, right? Parang straight from 8 a.m. to about, I think, 2 p.m. Fortunately, the school, after every hour, gets parang bio breaks of like 10 minutes. So what we do is we agree on what time he will wake up. So and then we set the schedule, and we try our best not to veer away from that schedule. And then I think for him, and I guess for a lot of kids, because they're very used to technology, they find it very interesting. So I hope that that continues. But the challenge, though, and I've told this to my friends, no, so I'm trying to figure this out. They've all at that age, they also figured out that you can change screens, right? And so while the teacher is talking, they also found out that you can mute Zoom, right? And the teacher can't hear you. So, so my challenge is, I'm working in another area. I would check up on him, and then just make sure na he's not looking at games while the school is while the class is ongoing. But what I've also told myself is that we'll take it slowly. Yung kumbaga, parang give everyone a break because everyone is still learning and adjusting, and will get the hang of it.
As a follow-up to that question, another concern of students and parents is when you have multiple students in one home. And not all homes have space. So how do they find like their corner so they don't overhear their siblings' lesson or they're not a distraction to the siblings? That's another one. And also they have to share gadgets. And when and then when multiple people are using the internet, it slows down. So like if the parents are working from home. So what tips would you have for families with more than one student in the house? Like there was one student we talked to, there are 4 of them in the house and they all have to find like their little study corners to make it work. Anyone?
I only have one eh. So baka si TRIX.
Yeah, well, I have 2 kids, but we're unschooling. But I just wanted to share, since I am unschooling, I feel like I want to encourage more moms to find also other ways to teach your children. If there was ever time for you to kind of explore other ways of learning, this would be the perfect time because there's no rat race at the moment, right? Your kids are not they're not gonna get left behind. Everybody, the entire world has stopped essentially, and now is the time to really sit down with your kids, get to know them, right? So if you had multiple kids and what, like a lot of, like one of them needs to use the computer, for example, or the laptop, and you have limited gadgets in your house, you can do other activities with your other kids as well. I feel like just it's so simple. You could sit down with them and read. You could start planting if you have the means to do that. You can start cooking with them. There are so many other ways to learn than just sitting in front of a computer, listening to your teacher, right? I mean, all that is great, but I'm just saying, since you're at home and you're at the comforts of your home, you have so many other more activities that you can do. Let them take care of the pet, do other things around the house that would help them, learn other things, because children will learn either way, through play or through other, through their experiences, daily experiences. So take advantage of this time while you have it. That's the advice that I could give.
I also wanted to say that along those lines, I think that one of the new things we're going to be talking about soon is synchronous versus asynchronous learning, where instead of the classes having to meet and do things at the same time, you will be allowed to sort of do things on your own, at your own pace, which will help those who have one gadget. So I think this is something that will also be developed as the semester goes along. The modules, for example, are a very good example, and I think USEC will agree with me on this, that the modules are a form of kind of asynchronous learning. Taking care of the pet while the others are doing this is a form of asynchronous learning. They don't have to be online at the same time, right? So Pam.
There's input from one of our viewers, Marie France Tayag. Having a routine is the answer. Also having a workstation that is distraction-free and conducive to learning. Okay. Ijo, going back to you, I know you shared a lot a while ago, but if you have more thoughts or observations about blended learning, can you share them with us? Any more thoughts about educators? Because I really feel like, a lot of them don't feel ready. And what are your concerns? Because you're studying as well, you're back in UP for your master's. How does blended learning affect you as a student?
Regarding yung experiences po ng teachers, Ms. Pam, yung ground reports na na-receive namin, it's really about concerns for their safety. Kasi some of them are being compelled or being asked to report on the ground or in schools. So that's really a challenge then for them because they have to deal with their personal anxieties and personal struggles. But they have a duty. They have a duty to the learners and as educators. So I think to reconcile that, it's really a mix of national and local government policies for them because the pandemic is not going away anytime soon. So planning for this should really not be about until the opening of classes. So for teachers, they're really asking for, aside from health measures like testing for them or um, putting up school clinics where there are none, there are a lot of strategies that we can institutionalize in schools and even at home to help learners and educators. As my personal, in my personal experience as a student in the University of the Philippines, patapos na po ako dapat eh. But because of the pandemic, ayun, naputol siya. But in fairness naman to UP and other universities, even before the pandemic, we've already been preparing learning strategies for, ang tawag nila is individual, immersive, and flexible learning. So yung sinasabi po ni Sir Rui kanina na a mix of synchronous and asynchronous learning platforms and communication platforms. Ginagamit na rin naman talaga siya. Like UP's learning management system, Zoom, Google Classroom, Edmodo, Uvle. So we have those platforms. But for me, I chose to defer muna until the next year kasi my field is anthropology and it relies heavily on face-to-face interactions, field work. So it can't really survive with online research lang. You really have to do participant observation pa and to engage with your subjects and informants. So I chose to defer. But blended learning, I think, could work in other disciplines. Since UP and other universities have been using this communication platform since years back, I think it takes some getting used to lang. And of course, siguro a blend of a proper mindset and support from communities and other sectors. For example, in UP, they have the UP Public Affairs Office has launched a donation drive, a campaign drive for 5,600 scholar ng bayan who can't afford remote learning. So yun yung problema in the National University. So they would need a source and sense of support in the time of COVID-19, even beyond technological devices and digital devices. So sinimula nila last week yung donation drive na yun. And yun, as for me, I really have no grand problem in deferring my my learning. So okay lang kahit ma-delay ng one semester yung thesis. But for other students, kagaya ng sinasabi ni Ms. Pam kanina, it's really difficult. So I think this is now the time to harness all the help and assistance that we could have and extend to other more needy students. Kasi na-establish na natin that the capacities are not really equal eh. So ito siguro yung time. Ito yung time while we're familiarizing ourselves with these different digital tools, communication tools. This is the time to really help others in the simplest sense. So that goes as well to the teachers, not because they're teachers and we're obliging them to do their duty, to do their part in making education push through despite the pandemic, malileft behind din sila. So more than, or aside from taking care of our learners, we also need to take care of our teachers. And I think one of the steps that the Department of Education and other local schools divisions are doing is yung remote psychosocial support for them. So that could be a very powerful tool. Yung peer meetings pa lang, peer counselings for them, I think that could really help our teachers. Kasi yun, more than the challenges in going to the field or preparing for their classes, yung increase in cognitive load din talaga sa kanila and having to deal with all this. Mahirap din. So, yun po. Parang, for me, it's community effort at this point. Now we don't have a vaccine and we have to deal with the pandemic that's not going away anytime soon.
True.
Thank you, Ijo.
Because
Yeah.
at the last webinar nga, diba, there we were talking about how, diba, there's that quote na it takes a village to raise a child. Parang this time it takes a village to educate a child because talagang everybody has to work. And the thing that really makes me think pa is there are educators who are worried about this, tapos parents pa sila at the same time. So grabe yung juggling act na kailangang mangyari. Anyway, Rui, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that just because before my last question, I think that one of the bigger issues that we're going to be facing especially for those who are in secondary or primary, is the number of hours, how they're going to do the equivalence of the number of hours in terms of home. Okay, our final question for this part is for everybody. Please give a really short answer, just one sentence. We really want to know this. Okay, there is admittedly a sneaking, unspoken feeling among parents that unless something drastic is done, August 24 is going to be an unmitigated disaster. They are afraid simply because, aside from the cases of APEC and these other schools, especially the public schools, this has never been done before. So, what can we do to make sure this does not happen? Let's do it in order. Yusek, what can we do to make sure this does not happen?
We are preparing hard. We have done dry runs, and the other point is it's about fear of getting their children getting infected. Will not make them go to school. They will be at home, and resources will be delivered at home if they don't have access to gadgets.
Okay, TRIX. Where is TRIX?
I'm here. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So that it won't be a disaster. Well, that really puts a lot of pressure on DepEd actually. But for the parents, and I speak also as a parent, I think what you can do for yourselves is to calm down, okay, and really just accept that this is happening. Okay, so this is the new normal, and it would be good for your emotional and mental health to just really know that everybody in the whole world is in this place right now. So there's really not much you can do about it. Don't pressure your kids into, don't push them into trying to make them learn about things. They are also coping as well. So I think those two things just for the parents and the kids so that they'll survive this new school year.
Thank you. JOIE, please.
Okay, so I agree with USEC dads. It's planning and preparation. So we've been preparing our modules, and our teachers have been on pre-service training since I think July 16. And so I think we are well prepared to start the school year. I also agree with TRIX that for parents, we should give ourselves a break. Not to stress so much, because when we are stressed, the kids are stressed as well, right? I think we should realize that we're all in this together and we're all going through it. So if the internet goes down or you can't go into Zoom for your child during class, it will be okay because the teachers would understand.
Okay, Ijo.
For me po, very important talaga yung policies and sustained effort from all sectors. And very crucial then at this point, yung strong personal assessment on the part of the parents and the learners themselves. If they feel like their health and safety are being compromised, they have the option to find alternatives or to stop whatever they're doing. It's really, they really have to be informed every step of the way, because that's the key to having a proper assessment, because in order for you to have a certain level of confidence with your institutions, you have to be confident then with yourself that you can pull that through. So it's yun po, it's really a mix of trust in institutions and personal assessment.
Thank you, Ija. Thank you, everybody. Now it's time to segue to our audience Q&A.
But before we go there, thank you so much to our speakers. This has been really interesting. I feel like later I'm gonna have to process everything I've heard from all of you because it's really a lot. And we have a lot of people who want to join the discussion. They have comments, they have questions. We're gonna get to that in a little bit. But first, we want to thank again our sponsors who made this virtual event possible. It's a really important conversation because so many people are worried about this. Thank you to Apex Schools and to Far Eastern University. We also want to give special thanks to our organization partners, Philippine Daily Inquirer, Inquirer.net, Inquirer 2BU, and Inquirer Super. And you know what? When we do the webinars, I've realized just now, we never thank the people behind the scenes. You only see us, the moderators and the speakers, but there are so many people also from the Inquirer who are working behind the scenes, from the tech guys to our marketing team, our advertising team. They work harder than we do, actually. So I want to say thank you to you guys. You are the unsung heroes of our webinars. There. So we go to the questions from the viewers.
Yes, moving on to the second half of the inclusive online discussion. We will now be focusing our attention on the inquiries of our viewers, and we have been taking them from Facebook. Let's start off with this one. Pam.
Okay. For Undersecretary San Antonio, Agnes Oboso wants to know, grabe failing agad yung topic. Can teachers fail students or drop them from class if they are enrolled but they don't comply sa requirements, or they're rarely there when there's a scheduled Zoom class?
We're issuing a new guideline for grading and assessment. We won't have quarterly examinations, but we will essentially base the ratings on the portfolios and other performance activities of the children. So some learners who may not meet the standards perhaps will not pass, but we would not encourage teachers to drop the children who are not attending the classes. I mean, there should be other ways for the child to be engaged and be made more excited to take part in the lessons. So, but the quarterly grades would still be there. We'll still have grades.
Okay, this question is for TRIX. She wants to know, how can unschooling work for poor families with lower educational attainment?
Okay, thank you for that question. That's actually a good question because it helps to know that unschooling actually encourages all of us to rethink what we know about education, right? So, because for decades we've been taught just one way, and that is you go to school, you get tested, you graduate, you go to a college, and then you get a job, right? That's how most of us have been raised. And unschooling makes you rethink that, because actually, if you think about it, unschooling is actually very inclusive of everybody, because you use your own life to teach your kids. So it takes away the pressure of graduating, of getting a degree even, right? Not to say those are not important, but if you are not able to afford school, then why wouldn't you as a parent teach your own children, right? So for example, if you come from a poor family, for example, you, let's say, are a farmer. Can you imagine what valuable insight and lessons a child can learn from a farmer? Just from, planting a seed and to wait for that to grow and to harvest that plant, and for you to eat it or to sell your produce, is already a life lesson on its own, and it's so valuable, and so it's applicable for all families, right? And, unbeknownst to all parents of the world, you are actually your kid's first teacher. And from the day they were born up until you send them to school, you've actually been unschooling. Surprise, So, you taught them how to, take their first steps. You taught them first about food. You taught them, the importance of being there for them, right? At an early stage of their life, their first word as well. So, unschooling for me, everybody, even a person without, or let's say a lower educational attainment, can use what he or she already knows to teach that to their children. So I hope that answers the question.
I'll go next. I have a back-to-back thing for Joey.
Okay.
For Joey, somebody just wanted to say, JP Ongkinko says, I am a teacher at APEC, and I am so glad that our school really made an effort to make learning continued that is accessible to all. Salute to Miss Joey. But there is a question that comes after that. Rhea Hazel Ong Pimenta wants to know your thoughts on the grading system. What adjustments or preparations are being made to help change the mindset of grade-conscious parents and students?
It's very difficult talaga if the parent or the student is grade conscious. In APEC schools, our grading system is not absolute numbers. It's 1 to 6, with 3 the passing grade. We also do not conscious, and this is a conscious decision. We do not publish rankings, and we also design our modules such that they're collaborative, and so you always work with a peer or a classmate, because in real life naman, diba, you always have to work with other people for your goal. And so what we have found, because the numbers are 1 to 6, so it's not 97, 96, 95. So if we both get a grade of 5, you don't know if you're higher than me or I'm higher than you, right? And so what the kids understand is that, or that what they feel is that it's not as competitive, and so there's less stress on the kids. So that's been helpful. And that's the feedback of even the students who have graduated grade 6 with honors from other schools who joined us. They say that pressure has lifted from them. And so we feel that this is something that we would continue to do.
Thank you. That comment from JF thanking APEC for preparing them is so refreshing to hear, after hearing about so many educators really worried. And I wish we have more of that, like we could hear more of that. I'm wondering actually what's going to happen to the parents who love posting their kids' report cards online. Like that to me sounds, I'm so glad Facebook didn't exist when I was a student, because I feel like my mom wouldn't have anything nice to post. The next question is for Yusek. This actually came from a number of different people, but they're connected. There are a lot of questions, sir, about the modules. I feel like, siguro because the educators really want to be prepared. So now they're like, when can we get the copies of the modules? Okay, so I'm going to read out the different questions. There's one, will we public school teachers receive at least soft copies of the modules? When will we get them? And then there's another one. This one is, the answer is yes, there are printed modules that are ready for people with no internet. And then, who will deliver the modules? Will the teachers be the ones to deliver? Or are the teachers going to be the ones to come up with the modules or the activity sheets? Are they the ones who will assess? This is a lot of work for the teachers. So yun, sir. Modules muna tayo.
First, the modules have been shared with the regions and the division offices for reproduction, and perhaps, yes, the digital copies may also be shared with the teachers. On the distribution aspect, I think the schools will have to come up with their own skins. And as demonstrated by Navotas, there were parents who came to school to claim the modules and return them after a week. But they also had volunteers from the village, who actually delivered for families whose parents were not able to go to the school to collect the modules. And in terms of the activity sheets, those are things we expect our fellow teachers to really provide, in addition, so that we can supplement and enrich the contents of the modules. Of course, it's going to be a part of the role of the teachers to assess the portfolios or the responses of the learners to the different activity sheets and the other tasks that they would assign the learners, so that they can demonstrate that they are learning.
True. This next question is for you as well. What are DepEd's plans for rural areas where the means of transportation are difficult?
Essentially, of course, they won't have internet learning, because most of them would not have access to the internet. So it would be self-learning modules, textbooks, and again, it's going to be similar to how it's going to be done elsewhere. They should encourage the parents to set a day where they could get the modules, the learning resources for the week. And then when they return the ones used the previous week, they get the new ones on the next week. So, however, if the parents won't be able to do the picking up, we feel that if you collaborate with your local barangay officials, they would be happy to lend a hand. And of course, the more committed teachers, if there are a few who would refuse to go to school, I know they would find a way to make sure that the learning resources will reach the families.
All right, I have a double-ended question. The first one is a comment from Paolo Bautista. He just wants to say, Meralco should let all the people know the schedule when the electricity will go off, because people will not be able to use the internet when it goes out. I have a question for Ijo. Ijo, as August 24 comes closer, what are we looking at in terms of coverage? And when August 24 happens, what will the reporters be paying attention to in those first, maybe few days, maybe first week, in terms of the implementation of this brand new approach to learning by the DepEd and the CHED?
So at first, it would really be an assessment if the 80% target of the DepEd, or the more than 22 million learners, have already began engaging in their online or remote classes. And crucial also to look at whether the modules or other learning modalities it's supposed to be delivered to them, especially in the provinces, are within their access. So siguro yun po muna yung stories or the narratives that we need to look at. And then next would be the challenges in using them. Because as you mentioned earlier, this is the first time that we're doing this, even the remote enrollment, that's the first time for us. So challenges, it's important to listen to the teachers and the learners who have been using this new modalities or new communication platforms, in order to find issues that we could work on, or specific nuances in different localities. Another thing is, if I were to report on this, I would look at how local governments pass policies or crafted programs that would support the national government's policy. For example, in Quezon City, the city government has earmarked around, let me check, 2.9 billion in funding for blended learning, but other local governments don't have that yet, especially in the provinces. So now that we're discussing having a solid planning or having a solid direction, not only until the opening of classes, but in the months to come. So this has to be a sustained effort. Very crucial to look at how local governments would ensure that once the national policy is there and once the national government has ensured that this blended learning could work, it's now part of the responsibility to look at communities or assess communities and give proper funding na rin for them in order for it nga to be sustained.
Yeah, because we assume naman na it won't go up without a hitch. So we'll just have to fix the glitches in those first few days. Okay,
Yes.
Pam.
I just wanted to read this comment from Ricky Colima. I think we have to explain to grade conscious parents that this is not the time of competition, but it's a time for collaboration, and we have to help each other so that no one gets left behind. I think that's a beautiful sentiment. There's a question from Lance Tabin, and Trix kind of mentioned this a while ago. Anyone can answer this question, but yun na nga, diba? Because usually you try to minimize screen time for children. So Lance says, my kids know the basics of opening the gadgets, laptop, computers, and mobile phone. In their school, they're not allowed to bring gadgets, and parents are asked not to overexpose kids to gadgets. But because of the new norm, I'm beginning to brief and orient my kids. Lance is a working mom, and she comes home on a weekly basis. How will she know that her kids are on the right track? There, who wants to answer?
Would there be somebody to facilitate the activities at home? That one has to be guided well as well. As far as the Department of Education is concerned, we say that the early grades learner should have no longer than 1.5 hours exposure to screen. And then the maximum is 4 hours for senior high school learners. So when we use like TV as the way to provide instruction, we will also schedule the lessons in such a way that the minimum or maximum screen time as suggested by pediatricians would be observed.
Oh, that's good. Yusek, while I have you here, there's another question about modules. Who will finance the reproduction of modules? Is it the local government?
It's going to be, again, the whole of community effort. The Department of Education is downloading funds, but the funds would not be enough. So SEFs have been earmarked for this as well. And then donations from the partners. We understand there's a big non-government organization calling for donations that will sponsor the reproduction of printed learning modules in some areas. And also, again, support from the multilateral agencies and other partners of the Department of Education.
Yusek, last time that we had the webinar, our COO, Attorney Rudyard, asked what can the role of the media be in this? Like, how can the media companies help? Because, diba, parang, yeah, go ahead.
We have realized when I'm asked, I always would answer when asked about the challenges the Department of Education faces. My first answer would always be how to make sure that the messages are understood by the Filipinos, because there are still many people who feel that when we say we will open classes, the kids will go to school. When in fact, we've been saying this, that it would be distance learning. So my own classmates in elementary and high school would text me, I cannot send my son to school because I don't like him to get infected by the virus. And I would reiterate that you don't have to make them go to school. The learning resources will be brought to your place. And so there's no worry about exposure to virus. But that is one example of perhaps a more aggressive effort to communicate with the help of the mainstream media and even social media, that these misconceptions are still in the hearts and minds of our parents. So yeah, helping perhaps disseminate the real intent of the Department of Education as enunciated in our learning continuity plan would make us have less problems when it comes to the misconceptions of parents and other leaders of the community and of our country.
Okay, Paolo Bautista has a question that I think is important. I think that unschooling has become one of our most interesting topics today. So obviously this is for TRIX, and this question I think occurs to a lot of people. Getting a job requires school credentials. How can unschooling children prepare them for careers in a future when they become adults and documents are required?
Okay. It's funny because I actually just wrote about this on my social media account yesterday because I feel like this question gets asked every day, right? Specifically, like, where will your kids go to college? How will they go to college? And, soon after, how do they get a job? So again, I throw it back to say that unschooling really makes you rethink the world that we're living in. Okay, so it helps you crush those mindsets that you already have. And one of that mindset that Paolo mentioned is that getting a job requires school credentials, because not all jobs require school credentials, actually. And our world is rapidly changing right now, that there are actually new available jobs that were non-existent before, that don't require any kind of school credential. Okay. But just to answer your question, practically speaking, DepEd actually offers homeschoolers and unschoolers as well of aptitude tests. So for example, if my kids, let's say they decide that, hey, you know what, we actually want to go to college, right? Or they want to go back to traditional, or not go back, they want to go to traditional schooling, for example. There are aptitude tests that will help them go back in the school system. So, if you were someone who was unschooling, for example, for a certain number of years, and then let's say specifically for jobs like example, they want to be a doctor, right? So obviously you need to go to medical school, right? For you to become a doctor, to become a lawyer, you have to go to law school, right? So unschooling doesn't make the schooling system irrelevant. Okay, this is really just for you to shift your mindset that there's not one way of learning. So I want to encourage like Paolo and other parents, that you can unschool, let's say for a certain time that you want, but if they do choose academic careers, there is a way for them to go back as well. And if not, they, like I said, there are jobs. There are many, many jobs that don't require school credentials. And when our kids are in the working age, which is, let's say, 15 years from now, who knows? Even in the last year, right, our world has changed just like that. So, we can't really predict what schooling will be like or what education will be like in that time.
There's a comment from Dexter Villanueva. Private schools are badly hit by the situation. Some private schools are closing. Teachers and personnel are being retrenched. And education is ranked as non-essential by the IATF. I don't think there's a question there. But if Miss JOIE wants to say something about that, I think earlier there was also a question about how the DepEd does focus a lot on public schools, but they want there's a parent, I think Chai, a parent of kids who go to private schools, want to know what the DepEd is doing for the students of private schools naman, who also don't feel ready. So Miss JOIE, any thoughts first?
Yeah, so I think in what DepEd has asked the private schools is they're asking all the private schools to let DepEd know what our modalities are and how ready are we to start the school year. I think the checklist that DepEd has released is also helpful for the private schools to to think about what are the things that they may have missed in terms of preparation. So I think that's how, and then um, the districts, the DOs are looking and checking with each of the schools to see how prepared they are. And I think also asking if some schools need help with preparation. Yusek, that's you were going to say something.
Yes, actually, we have modified the guidelines because many private schools said like they were too harsh. So we extended the deadlines to comply with certain requirements. But yes, the checklist was supposed to be a guide on what the private schools should address when they explore the idea of delivering distance learning. Yeah, I think the question is also about what else is DepEd doing to support the private schools. We have not suspended the education service contracting. We will continue to implement that. So learners enrolled in private schools will also get some financial support from the government. The other program that we will implement as well would be the senior high school voucher. So children enrolled in private schools will still get the support, the financial assistance from the government through the programs I have cited.
While we have Yusek here, this is a rather dramatic question. I am not that negative, but the problem about modular approach is that there are learners who do not know how to read and are non-numerate. Therefore, how will they work on their modules and who will assist or help them if their parents and guardians are also non-numerate and non-literate?
Thank you very much for thank you very much for the question. Right now, part of what we're doing is to call for volunteers. We hope to be able to hire para teachers or volunteer teachers, college graduates, or even college students who wish to be a part of the effort to educate the children will be allowed to provide service. We also get support from the local governments. Again, they are really ready to support us. Some of them are offering allowances and other incentives for the volunteers. On the part of DepEd, if the volunteers are education graduates or licensed teachers waiting to be appointed, they can use the experience as a credit. They would get certain credits when they apply as teachers in the Department of Education.
Here's a question that I feel every time there's a conversation about blended learning, this comes up, and I've heard this so many times. For private school from private school parents, this is from CM Mamaklay. She's asking, will tuition fee be discounted this school year? Because the question of parents is, why are they being charged for laboratory, for library, when clearly the kids are not gonna be in the school, so they're not gonna be using the lab and the library. So can we get an answer, maybe from Yusek, maybe from Miss JOIE about this?
Okay, so that question has been asked a lot of times, so a lot of schools are giving discounts, right? Apex schools, for example, while we're on online learning, we'll give discounts to the parents. But if we go back to face-to-face, then the discount discontinues as well. But for those schools which are not giving discounts, and this is the reason. So even if you're not using the laboratory today, the laboratory, when we build it, or even the library, the cost of that library or laboratory is spread across 5 years or even more. So you don't necessarily recover your costs for building anything in just that 1 year. And so that's an ongoing requirement, right? The other thing is, even if we're all online, all of the schools are still required to have those libraries and those laboratories, and also in preparation for when you go back, right? It's not as if we will give those spaces will go away because we won't be using them. The schools are still paying for them. So I guess that's how it is for the other schools who couldn't give a discount.
And I suppose that, and I suppose part of that is that you're still paying for personnel.
That's true. Yeah, and
There's still
also
people, yeah.
yes, and also because face-to-face classes are very different from online learning, and so most schools are developing materials to take classes online. So there's even if you save a little bit, let's say electricity, there's a lot of cost involved with developing your modules, the technology, training your teachers, rolling out materials. So there's may kapalit eh. And sometimes even more because online learning for most schools will be new. So we're all also investing on this as well.
Just a comment, our favorite commenter, Paulo Bautista says, thank you for mentioning my question. Outside the Philippines, this is for TRIX. Outside the Philippines, companies just look at the applicant's job experiences. They don't look at the grades. So that's interesting.
Yes. Yeah, they do that. And I think even now in the Philippines, like me, for example, I am a graduate of culinary arts. So I was actually a chef for, 10 to 12 years. But right now I transitioned from being a chef to working for a digital food industry, which, led me to digital marketing. I mean, just the transition of my own life in the last 5 years is really proof that, experience is so important as well when looking for a job. And again, like I mentioned earlier, things will drastically change. Believe me, in the next year, in the next 5 years, in the next 15 years, when our kids need to, start thinking about jobs.
Hey. Pam?
I just wanted to say that I think the beautiful thing is we have different perspectives in this discussion, but ultimately we all want the same thing. We all want kids who will grow up to be well-rounded people and we want to give them the best possible start in life with equipping them with all the knowledge that they will need. And again, it's really going to be a collaboration, and everybody really just needs to help one another. And I guess like it was said earlier, we will all have to wait and see, because that's it. And I think one of the most important things said today, Ijo kept saying the word sustained effort. Yes, because we are not going to see the success on August 24 for sure. This is something that we're gonna have to observe over the coming weeks, months, and even years.
Yeah, but I would like to add to that in the sense that August 24 is a red letter day. As in, that is the next date, and people will be looking forward to it, and we will be seeing what happens on that day. All eyes will be on the teachers, as students, the parents, on the DepEd. On August 24th, Ijo will be covering that day, and we will find out what happens on that day. All right, that was a great discussion. That was a fantastic. Yes, Pat.
One last habol, because I feel like it's the perfect. Yusek Dats is the perfect person to talk to about this. We have one final comment because he's in charge of reviewing the curriculum hanggang K-12, right, sir? So we have a request from Lance, hoping that basic finance and accounting can be included in the curriculum for grade 7 and 8. Sir, alam mo, I agree, because until now, I have no finance knowledge. And if I learned it in grade 7, I feel like my life would be better. Yun lang.
Noted,
Yeah,
noted.
I agree with you, Lance. Thank you for that suggestion. Okay.
So that was a great discussion. I have to admit, we have had a very interesting and very diverse group of panelists today who have presented very different perspectives on the idea of education at home. We want to thank our speakers for their valuable insights. Unfortunately, this is all the time we have for our inclusive discussion. If you want to watch more inclusive discussions, please check out our YouTube channel, Inclusive, the Inquirer webinar series. You'll see it on the screen right now.
There. We will be closing this virtual event with final remarks from our speakers. Let's start off with Undersecretary JOIE San Antonio of the Department of Education.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pam. Thank you very much, Ruel. Of course, we know that this is the new normal. There would be new roles, and I just appeal for my fellow teachers to embrace the new roles, and at the same time, my fellow parents, we will be more engaged with the academic lives of our kids. And as research have discovered, the more the parents are engaged in the lives, academic lives of their children, the better the children are able to learn. God bless, mabuhay.
Thank you, Yusek Diosdado San Antonio. Next, we have TRIX, CLASARA.
Thank you for tuning in to everyone who stayed and watched. And I agree with the Undersecretary. I think it's so important to embrace our new roles. You know, for me, I can speak only as a parent, right? And also as an unschooler, you know, I want to encourage all the parents. You know, I know that we've lost a whole lot this year, you know, and it really feels like we've lost half the year, you know, but think about also the things that you've gained, which is, you know, time with your children, right? And that is so much more valuable in terms of teaching them. I hope that this time also kind of made you rethink about education, you know, and that learning really never stops. So, you know, I just encourage all the parents that, again, you are your kids' first teachers. So, you know, don't stop teaching your kids anything and everything. And I wish all the parents the best, especially come August 24. And thank you again for watching tonight.
Thank you, Trix. Next, we have JOIE Lopez.
Thank you again, Pam and Ruel. Thank you to everyone for listening. This year has been very challenging. The coming school year will be very interesting. It will test all of us, the schools, the implementing agencies, the parents, and the students. But we all have a common goal, that of ensuring continuing quality education for our children. If we work together and be patient with the adjustment, then I think we could get our kids through it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. JOIE. And finally, we have our last speaker. And Ijo, we're going to be watching out for your coverage. We want to see what's going to happen on August 24 through your eyes. MARIEJO, Ijo, Ramos.
Thank you very much to all the speakers. There are a lot of interesting points raised tonight na pwede kong isulat bukas for my stories. For me, every learner, teacher, education stakeholder at this point is really facing tremendous challenges that would require resilience. But the education sector really needs solidarity now more than ever. So I think instead of settling with individual resilience or the kanya-kanya mentality, any plan that comes out of our institutions and sectors should have the entire community in mind. Hindi lang dapat nakukulong sa sarili nating household. Because only then can we collectively find solutions. And yung August 24, that's when we can see how all of this will be put together and kung successful ba talaga siya. So really hoping for the best.
We all are. Thank you so much once again for being part of Inclusive. We want to thank our speakers. We want to thank the people behind the scenes. You guys are awesome. The people who watched. This Inquirer webinar series is produced by the Philippine Daily Inquirer, Inquirer.net, Inquirer Super, and Inquirer 2BU. We want to thank our generous sponsors, Apex Schools and Far Eastern University. I think what Miss JOIE said a while ago about Apex Schools sharing information and materials for other educators to use is such a beautiful thing, and it just goes to show that we all really need to work on this together, because we're doing it for the children and the young people of our country, and that's for the future of our country as well. Now, for families who are still looking for gadgets that they need to use for the coming school year, Inquirer Plus has a special treat for you. You can check out the Inquirer Plus tablet bundle promo. You can get a 7th generation iPad with an Inquirer Plus all-access subscription for just $999 a month. For details, you can see this on your screen. Take a screenshot if you want. You can go to shop.inquirer.com.ph/product/iPad. You can call 0908-896-6000 or email subscription@inquirer.com.ph.
You can see it on your screen. All right. Thank you for making this discussion immensely successful and fruitful. We promise you that there will be more to come. Once again, this is Ruel S. De Vera
and Pam Pastor from the Philippine Daily Inquirer.
Thank you for tuning in to INQlusive, the Inquirer webinar series. Here's a final word from our sponsor. Please stay safe and stay super.
We
Happy
are
weekend.
Apex School's newest education ambassadors.
Hi. You're probably wondering why there are two of us, a real-world version and a digital version. That is because APEC has created 2 online digital courses in light of the new norm.
Agile and Flex.
That's right. It's no coincidence that APEC's curriculum is centered around technology. Their whole culture is. It's what makes them perfectly placed to take on the new normal.